A legal dynasty fell when its heir paid for his own shooting. But what was he running from? This is True Crime Unveiled.
The call came into the Colleton County 911 dispatch center at 10:06 p.m. on June 7, 2021. The caller was out of breath, his voice pitched high with panic. He told the dispatcher, "I need police and an ambulance immediately. My wife and child have been shot badly." The dispatcher asked for the location, and he gave the address of a sprawling 1,700-acre hunting estate known as Moselle. When asked if the victims were breathing, the caller said no. He then offered a detail without being asked. He said he had just returned to the property after visiting his mother and found them by the dog kennels.
Wait, he offered an alibi in the first minute of the 911 call?
Yes. Before police even arrived, the caller was establishing a timeline. He also told the dispatcher that he had gone up to the bodies and touched them to check for a pulse. This was a crucial statement, because it meant any physical evidence found on his clothes could potentially be explained away as cross-contamination.
That is a very specific way for a grieving family member to act. Who was the caller?
The caller was Richard Alexander Murdaugh, known to everyone as Alex, and the victims were his 52-year-old wife Maggie and his 22-year-old son Paul. For nearly a century, the Murdaugh family name had been synonymous with the law in the South Carolina Lowcountry. They were a dynasty. 3 generations of Murdaugh men had served as the chief prosecutor for the 14th Circuit. They also ran a private litigation firm that generated millions. They held immense political, legal, and social power. If you were in trouble in this part of the state, the Murdaugh family was who you wanted on your side. And if you crossed them, they were who you feared.
So a family with 100 years of legal dominance suddenly becomes the center of a double homicide. What was life actually like for Maggie and Paul before this happened?
On the surface, it was a life of extreme privilege. But beneath that, the family was buckling under pressure. Maggie was a devoted mother who loved her sons, but friends later described her as feeling increasingly isolated. She spent much of her time at their beach house in Edisto, away from the Moselle estate. Paul was the youngest son, and his life had recently become a nightmare for the family's reputation. In 2019, Paul was driving a boat while heavily intoxicated. The boat crashed into a bridge piling, resulting in the death of a 19-year-old girl named Mallory Beach. At the time of his murder, Paul was facing multiple felony charges. The family was facing a massive wrongful death lawsuit, and the intense public scrutiny was threatening to expose the family finances.
And in a family that cares that much about legacy, a public trial and a financial audit would be catastrophic.
Exactly. And that brings us to the morning of the murders. On June 7, 2021, the CFO of Alex's law firm confronted him about hundreds of thousands of dollars in missing fees. The firm was demanding answers. But the confrontation was cut short when Alex received a phone call. His father had been hospitalized and was in failing health. Alex used the medical emergency to end the financial meeting. Later that day, he asked Maggie to come to Moselle. Friends said she was reluctant to go, but she agreed. They had a late family dinner. Around 8:30 p.m., Paul went down to the dog kennels, which were located about a quarter of a mile away from the main house. Maggie followed him shortly after.
So they are down at the kennels, separated from the main house. Where does Alex say he is during this time?
Alex claimed he stayed at the main house, fell asleep on the couch while watching television, woke up, and then drove to his mother's house in a neighboring town. His mother suffered from Alzheimer's disease. According to his initial statements to law enforcement, he never went down to the kennels before leaving. He claimed he only went down there upon his return, which is when he found the bodies and called 911. The local police and the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division, known as SLED, arrived to a horrific scene. Paul had been shot twice with a shotgun, once in the chest and once in the head, while standing inside a small feed room. Maggie had been shot 5 times with an AR-style rifle, out in the open near the kennels. The brutality of the crime suggested extreme anger.
2 different weapons. Does that mean police were looking for 2 different shooters?
Initially, the 2-weapon theory strongly suggested multiple killers. It confused the investigators, but they soon discovered that both weapons matched the ammunition of firearms owned by the Murdaugh family. Despite this, Alex was not immediately named a suspect. The investigation dragged on for months, shielded by the family's influence, But 3 months later, on September 4, 2021, the story took a bizarre turn. Alex called 911 again, this time from a rural roadside. He claimed he had pulled over to change a flat tire, and a man in a passing truck had shot him in the head.
Wait. Someone did a drive-by shooting while he was changing a tire? Just 3 months after his wife and son were murdered?
That was his story. He was airlifted to a hospital with a superficial graze wound to his head. But the lie collapsed within days. The tire on his SUV was not actually flat. It had been intentionally slashed. Investigators pressed him, and Alex finally confessed. He admitted he had hired a distant cousin, a man named Curtis Eddie Smith, to shoot and kill him on the side of the road.
He paid someone to kill him? Why would he do that?
Alex claimed he wanted to die so his surviving son Buster could collect a $10 million life insurance payout. This staged suicide attempt blew the case wide open. It proved that Alex Murdaugh was capable of staging a crime scene, lying to law enforcement, and orchestrating violence to solve a financial problem. The financial audit at his law firm had accelerated, revealing that Alex had spent a decade stealing nearly $9 million from his own clients. He had stolen from injured victims, grieving families, and even the family of his longtime housekeeper who had died in a fall at his home.
If he is lying about a roadside shooting and stealing from dead clients, everything he said on the night of the murders has to be re-examined. Did police actually verify his alibi from June 7th?
They did, and this leads us into the deepest part of the investigation. The timeline was the entire case. Investigators pulled the data from Alex's Chevrolet Suburban. The car's computer recorded exactly when it was turned out of park and when it was put back into park. They pulled the step data from his iPhone. They pulled the orientation data, which shows exactly when a phone is picked up, put down, or rotated. And they pulled the data from Maggie and Paul's phones. And the digital footprint completely dismantled Alex's story.
How precise are we talking? Could they pinpoint the exact time of the murders?
Yes, down to a window of less than 5 minutes. At 8:44 p.m., Paul Murdaugh opened the Snapchat app on his phone. He was taking a video of a friend's dog that was staying in the kennels. The video was less than a minute long. Paul's phone locked at 8:49 p.m. Maggie's phone locked at 8:49 p.m. Neither of their phones were ever unlocked by them again. Investigators believe the murders happened precisely at 8:49 p.m.
And where did Alex's phone data put him at 8:49?
That is the missing piece. Alex's phone recorded no steps, no movement, and no screen interactions from 8:09 p.m. until 9:02 p.m. According to his phone, he was completely stationary during the exact window the murders occurred. But at 9:02 p.m., his phone suddenly came alive. Over the next 4 minutes, he took 283 steps. The defense would later argue he was simply waking up from a nap and walking around the house. But prosecutors argued this frantic pacing was the behavior of a man cleaning up a crime scene, hiding weapons, and preparing to leave.
But a lack of steps does not prove murder. He said he was asleep. A sleeping person does not record steps. How do prosecutors bridge the gap between him waking up and him pulling the trigger?
They bridged it with the Snapchat video on Paul's phone. Because the phone was locked, investigators did not discover the video until months later when the FBI finally cracked the passcode. When investigators played the video, it changed everything. The video shows a dog inside a kennel. But in the background, you can clearly hear 3 voices having a casual conversation about the dog. One voice is Paul, one voice is Maggie, and a third voice belongs to Alex Murdaugh.
So his voice is on tape, at the kennels, just 5 minutes before the murders?
Exactly. The video was recorded at 8:44 p.m. The phones lock at 8:49 p.m. For over a year, Alex had sworn to police, to his family, and to the public that he never went to the kennels that night. The video proved he was standing mere feet from his wife and son, moments before they were slaughtered.
That is a massive lie. But legally, does a lie equal a murder conviction? Could the defense argue he went down there, went back to the house, fell asleep, and someone else ambushed them?
That was exactly the defense strategy. When the trial began in January 2023, the defense team, led by highly experienced attorneys, went on the attack. They argued that the state's timeline was incredibly tight. If the murders happened at 8:49 and Alex turned on his car to drive to his mother's house at 9:06, he would have had less than 17 minutes to shoot 2 people with 2 different weapons, wash off the blood, dispose of the guns, dispose of the bloody clothes, and get in his car. The defense argued this was simply impossible.
17 minutes is very fast to clean a double homicide. Did police find any blood on his clothes or in his car?
This became the most fiercely disputed forensic evidence of the entire trial. Before the trial, investigators had indicated that the white t-shirt Alex was wearing on the night of the murders contained high-velocity blood spatter. This type of spatter typically only occurs when someone is standing very close to a gunshot. The prosecution used this claim to secure an indictment from the grand jury.
So they had his shirt with the victim's blood on it? That sounds like undeniable proof.
It would have been, but it fell apart. The defense demanded the laboratory reports and the testimony of the forensic experts. It turned out the initial tests for blood on the shirt were inconclusive, and subsequent tests were negative. Furthermore, the chemical used to test the shirt had actually destroyed the fabric, meaning the defense could not conduct their own independent testing. The defense proved that the state's blood spatter expert had changed his report after communicating with law enforcement. By the time the trial started, the prosecution had completely abandoned the blood spatter evidence. They did not even introduce it to the jury.
Wow. So the jury is watching the state walk back its strongest piece of physical evidence. That creates a lot of reasonable doubt. If they did not have physical evidence, what was the prosecution relying on?
They relied on the circumstantial timeline, the financial motive, and the kennel video. The prosecution theory was that Alex's financial world was collapsing on June 7th. He was hours away from being exposed as a massive fraud, which would have ruined his reputation and sent him to prison. Prosecutors argued that Alex killed his wife and son to generate overwhelming community sympathy, which would immediately halt the financial investigations.
That motive is incredibly dark. But does it actually make sense? How does killing your own son solve a bank fraud problem?
The defense argued it made absolutely no sense. They called the theory illogical and absurd. They pointed out that Alex loved his family, and there was no history of domestic violence. They suggested that the real killers were vigilantes, seeking revenge against Paul for the fatal boat crash. The defense highlighted the poor police work on the night of the murders. Sled agents failed to search the surrounding woods immediately. They allowed family friends to walk through the crime scene. They failed to properly collect footprints and tire tracks because it was raining. The defense argued the investigation suffered from tunnel vision from day one.
If the physical evidence is compromised and the motive is debatable, the trial must have been incredibly tense. Did Alex testify to explain the kennel video?
He did. In a highly unusual and risky move, Alex Murdaugh took the stand in his own defense. Under oath, he finally admitted that he was at the kennels at 8:44 p.m. He admitted he had lied to sled agents, his law partners, and his family for nearly 2 years. When asked why he lied, he blamed his decades-long addiction to opioid painkillers. He claimed the pills made him intensely paranoid and that when police started asking questions about his timeline, his paranoia caused him to invent a fake story, and once he told the lie, he felt trapped in it.
So he expects the jury to believe that he happened to leave the kennels just seconds before a team of phantom assassins arrived, and that his only crime was lying out of paranoia?
That is what he asked them to believe. But the lead prosecutor, Creighton Waters, subjected him to a grueling cross-examination. Waters did not just focus on the murders. He spent hours walking Alex through his financial crimes, forcing him to admit, over and over, that he had looked vulnerable clients in the eye and stolen their settlement money. The prosecution's strategy was clear. If Alex could lie so convincingly to vulnerable people for over 10 years, he could easily lie to the jury about killing his family.
It comes down to credibility. The jury had to decide if a financial con man was also capable of being a family annihilator.
Exactly. And the jury did not need much time to decide. After a 6-week trial that included dozens of witnesses, endless forensic disputes, and the dramatic testimony of Alex himself, the jury received the case. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. On March 2, 2023, they returned a verdict of guilty on all counts, including 2 counts of murder. The judge sentenced him to 2 consecutive life terms in state prison, pointing out the absolute devastation he had caused to everyone who ever trusted him.
3 hours of deliberation after 6 weeks of testimony. That means the jury did not buy his paranoia excuse for a second.
They did not. Jurors later indicated that the kennel video was the absolute anchor of their decision. Without that video, the timeline would have been just a theory. The video trapped him in his own lie. The state never found the murder weapons. They never found bloody clothes. The physical mechanics of how Alex managed to commit the murders and clean himself up in such a short window remain entirely unproven. The defense continues to appeal the conviction, arguing that the financial crimes unfairly prejudiced the jury and that the forensic evidence was mishandled.
It really leaves you wondering about those missing minutes. Even with a conviction, the physical reality of the crime scene still feels like a puzzle with missing pieces.
That is the legacy of this case. It dismantled a century of power in the Lowcountry, exposing a man who believed his name could protect him from anything. But in the end, the dynasty was not undone by a rival family or a federal task force. It was undone by a 1-minute video, taken by the son he was about to kill. If this case left you questioning the timeline or the limits of circumstantial evidence, subscribe for more careful investigations into cases that still divide people.
And tell us in the comments what you believe happened in those missing 17 minutes, because the physical logistics of the crime still leave room for difficult questions.
If this episode was worth your time, a like helps support the channel and keeps these stories in front of people who still want answers.
Stay safe and keep questioning everything.